Hey nerds, what's up? Should we hear less from authors about their work? I was recently browsing the internet. Okay, fine, it was Tumblr, but who wants to admit that in 2026? When I came across this post. My toxic fandom take is that I think that it's awful how much we can talk to creators and get answers from them word of God style. We should be out here in a godless place rooting for scraps of lore in the media like truffle pigs out in the fields. And then a follow-up tag. Look into your heart and do that thing that your English teacher called interpretation. And I laughed. But then I was like, do I agree with this? So you and I, we're gonna talk through it today and see if we can come to some sort of answer about really if that's how the internet and fandom should be. Now I wanna make a quick note here that I'm gonna be particularly focusing on hearing from authors explaining the work itself and not talking about knowing too much about authors' lives or political opinions, as I've talked about that in a few other videos. And so I'm gonna narrow the scope today to just authors speaking about their works. There's no question that our access to authors is greater than ever before, and the clearly most influential factor in that increasing interaction is the adoption and continual development of the internet. And it's not even just like the adoption of the internet, but also how trends and our usage of the internet has changed over time. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to claim somehow that fandom didn't exist pre-internet, or that fandoms haven't been doing similar things since the dawn of time and having interactions with authors. Probably one of the most famous stories, but I still love it, of like the first kind of fandom reaction interactions has to do with Sherlock Holmes and author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. That was kind of a tongue twister. In 1893, Doyle wrote what was supposed to be the final Sherlock Holmes story, The Final Problem, in which he killed the titular hero. Documents and sources tell us that Doyle was tired of Holmes, tired of writing it, and tired of it taking away from what he considered more literary pursuits. Well, the fans were not happy. More than 20,000 readers canceled their subscription to the magazine that published Sherlock Holmes stories, and the magazine, as well as Doyle himself, received angry letters, like very angry. The reaction was so strong and sustained for such a long period of time that Doyle did end up reviving Holmes a few years later. Over the various decades since then, fandoms have continued to evolve and have continued to change how they interact with authors, but I think the reason that the internet has changed these interactions so much is that not only did it make the world incredibly smaller, but it also sped up the ability to interact. Information about authors pre-internet was going to come primarily from physical sources and in-person events. So you'd have things like SFF cons, fan magazines, newspapers, things that could be mailed out, things that could be gotten only in a physical way. This was going to lead to kind of three main things. One, information was going to move a lot slower because physical media takes time to print and create. B, it was going to make information harder to access in general because you had to go find it outside of your home in ways that weren't quite as easy as a Google search, which would generally lead to C, which would mean that fandom spaces were generally going to be much, much smaller because they didn't have as much reach. It also means that unless you were incredibly successful and a pretty well-known author, you likely just wouldn't have that much information about yourself out there other than what was on the back of your book in your author bio. So really the time I think this post is trying to hearken to is not actually pre-internet, but rather early internet fandom. I would hazard a pretty good guess that the creator of this post is a millennial and probably pretty close in age like myself, and experienced a lot of fandoms on the internet in the 90s and early 2000s before social media really took over. They aren't really asking to go back pre-internet, they're asking to go back pre-social media, which is when I feel like author interaction really ramped up. From personal experience, I think the largest changes in fandoms from the pre-internet primarily fall into three categories. One, the communities are larger now with way more people involved. Two, there is a quicker turnaround of information and faster news cycles. And three, the monetization of fandom spaces. These might seem like they'd only affect fandoms at first glance, but I think they're actually also affecting authors as well. The internet has grown a lot in scope and access, which means more people are online now than ever before. I think in general, we're seeing a much broader range of ages online. And then there's also just the number game. In 1995, the estimated world population was 5.76 billion people. And in 2025, that estimated population was 8.3 billion people. Technology has also vastly improved in terms of translation tools, meaning more areas of the internet are more accessible for more people. Larger communities often mean less homogenous communities, which means that fandom spaces may feel less like places where people can root around and dig for information, and feel more like places with a lot of arguments and a lot of people wanting to do a lot of different things. The faster news cycle and faster movement that we are used to in internet spaces may also feel like people aren't sitting down and looking for and diving deep in information in ways they used to. And finally, this growth of people also means that there's a very convenient large group of people to sell to. During my time on YouTube, I now have had the opportunity to meet and interact with many different authors, and I would never make the claim that they don't genuinely enjoy talking to fans and genuinely enjoy those interactions, and that they're very meaningful, especially when people tell them how their work affected their life or that they're very invested in this art they put out. But I also think that there is this element that talking with fans is seen as a job now. Your job isn't just to write and create the book that you want. It is also required of you to advertise your book yourself. And the way that's done is being online and interacting with fans through social media or different avenues like that. Now, a lot of this has to do with the ways publishing has changed, but we only have so much time and I really try to limit the scopes of the video. So we're talking about fandoms and internet and how that has contributed to that. The internet and interacting with your fans is a really easy way to gain visibility and sell your work. I've also talked in other videos about how publishers are directly just giving book deals to influencers who already have a built-in fan base that they know they can easily monetize. Being interviewed by and working with influencers who already have an audience may be another way that interacting with the internet can sell your work. But that's just looking at point 3. I think points 1 and 2 of these larger, less homogenous communities can also deeply affect authors in being misunderstood. If you're an author and you're online and you see a take gaining traction that's really misrepresentative of the themes of your work or what you believe, you're probably gonna wanna correct it. As someone who gets misunderstood in my comment section, sometimes accidentally and sometimes clearly very willfully, I can understand how hard it is to just ignore that and let people misunderstand you. Okay, we're gonna come back to that point in a second to wrap things up, because first I want to admit that in this conversation, we can't just say one size fits all. I think we so easily wanna put things into little black and white buckets, like authors are just talking too much these days and explaining too much about their works and we shouldn't hear from them. Or no, it's fabulous. Authors should be interacting with fans all the time, and the more they talk and the more they interact with fans is what we deserve. And obviously there's just a lot of nuance in between here. I think it's entirely possible that different books and different authors just have different needs. And I don't think we could be talking about a subject like authors who are involved in fandoms without bringing up Brandon Sanderson. Perhaps the fantasy author today most known for interacting with fans, and not only interacting with fans, but in the exact way this meme is stating, with things he said even being called Word of Brandon, presumably to me a riff on the Word of God. Far from fans wanting less of this, I think Sanderson has actually leveraged this type of interaction into insane success, even being able to support his own convention every year in Salt Lake City. Certainly this kind of interaction may be a turnoff to some people, but I do think this is a case in which Sanderson's works are just uniquely situated to support this kind of fandom interaction. Known for his intense world building, hard magic system, and intricate storylines that all interconnect, I think it is both fun and rewarding for his fans to be able to puzzle piece theories and ideas together along with Sanderson. An intense outlier, Sanderson is the type of person who has intense in-house wikis to keep everything together, and also seemed to be genuinely a very outgoing person who enjoys working his authorship as a business. These two things together seem just uniquely situated to a lot of fan interaction. Now, just in case you didn't know, you're new here, I am a Sanderson fan. It's really fun, I'm not gonna lie. But would I want all of my fandoms to be like that? No, That sounds incredibly exhausting. For some series, it just simply wouldn't make sense. I was thinking of Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinneman, who is a self-proclaimed pantser who doesn't know necessarily how important a character or object or event will be from one moment to the next of its inception. Despite making a full and fantastic story, he wouldn't be able to raffo anyone because he wouldn't necessarily know the answer himself. Other stories with more open or unexplainable magic may just not be well suited to the kind of explanations that authors would give about their work. I recently, actually it probably wasn't that recent, but whatever, I made a video once about religion in A Song of Ice and Fire because I really love how that series handles religion. And yes, I actually think my feelings and analysis in A Song of Ice and Fire would be harmed if George R. R. Martin came out and said, this God isn't real and this God is real. That wouldn't serve the work or my relationship to it. We read a lot of different kinds of books for a lot of different kinds of outcomes. And I think some series, the joy can be in that deep diving author connection where you really are trying to find the answer to everything. Whereas other books, the journey is more about finding the thematic elements and how they relate to yourself and your reading journey rather than having an answer. I don't think that's generally going to be a hot take. I think in general, people can understand there are different needs for different book series, but this is the internet, and you would be surprised at how often people are like, if you like X, it's impossible for you to like Y because they're so different, when obviously we all like a variety of things for a variety of reasons. So how are these author interactions affecting our fandoms and the relationships to the works? I think it would be very easy to just focus on the portion of this post that's talking about the lore itself and getting those answers, but I also think there's something else there, which is a commentary on how fandoms act now, and that perhaps we are missing this fandom activity that searching and creating and looking was a part of the fandom environment. And I do think coming up with theories and searching for little tiny things in a text can really bring fandoms together and can be very fun. And I also think there's this element of interpretation and yes, critical thinking that we are continually worried that we are now missing. And I think this ties back a little bit to what I was talking about earlier about authors feeling the need to explain themselves and feeling the need to kind of explain their thematic elements because of how fast the internet moves and how often people will just kind of get outraged without even reading the original book or the original work that's being referenced, but just say, you are saying something bad is happening in this and I don't like that, so I will also comment on it. And how our speeding up of news cycles can kind of snowball that out of control, which might be why there's kind of this weird increased interaction of explanation. And as far as that works into the second point, media literacy and critical thinking, yes, obviously, I think I would like authors to do less work in that space. I don't want authors to feel required to explain themselves. I would like if fandom still wanted to do the work, and not even fandom, to be honest, people wanting to do the work of really trying to sit down and think about what those mean and really engage with the work without having to be explicitly told what it is trying to say. To be frank, I think there are a lot of authors who would agree with this take. Authors who would just love their fans to maybe root around a little more like pigs in a truffle field. But I think maybe for various reasons that we've just explained, it might not feel possible for them. And that's obviously ignoring authors who thrive and love that environment. And I think they should do it because it's fun if they love it. I think as with literally anything, there's nuance. I read Ursula K. Le Guin's nonfiction essay about The Left Hand of Darkness before I read The Left Hand of Darkness. And I do think hearing some of her thoughts on her thought process in writing that book deepened my understanding of the book. However, it didn't at all replace my own understanding or my own interpretations of the work because there's a place for both of them to exist. In the end, I think this is something that happens with a lot of new technologies and social evolutions. Some things are gained and some things are lost. I think my gut reaction as a millennial, and I'm sure many of you who aren't millennials feel this into whichever category you fit, the gut reaction to this kind of post is like, yeah, things were better back then. But I think when we really look at it, I think in a lot of ways, fandoms have been helped and made more fun and larger by the internet. And I really wouldn't trade that for anything. My experience being able to literally do this, which is social media, by the way, has allowed me to engage and meet some of my closest friends through fandom. On the other hand, do I think something's also been lost? Yes. I think our desire for more and more content and our desire to be online and engage in the way that current social media landscape has us engage means that maybe we aren't going as deep or diving as in as we used to, and that kind of slower function of fandom, the long periods where we were bored enough to really dive deep, can sometimes feel lost. And that the idea of slowing down and really trying to engage with the work that you are reading and engage with what is being said and with difficult themes before trying to find an answer still has place within our fandoms. And I don't think we necessarily have to lose it. I think in some ways it can just be a personal choice in how we engage with things. Some people hate it when I don't have an answer. And this is one of those I don't have an answer. I just thought it was a funny post and then I couldn't stop thinking about it and fandoms and how they've changed in our interaction with authors. I think in general, it's positive. I think it's very fun to be able to engage with the creators of our favorite works, but I would never want answers to replace our ability to search and engage with the work of our own. And who among us hasn't decided to just completely disregard canon at some point just because we like what we think better? That's the fandom experience, let me tell you. If you like these kind of deep dives and videos, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. I always want to hear what you're thinking in the comments. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.